Could there be a forgotten military installation in the nearest woods to your town? How about a top-secret bunker lurking beneath the streets of your city? It might sound unlikely, but these long-forgotten military finds are out there if you know where to look. We certainly know where to look, and that's how we're able to bring you so many great forgotten military finds in this video. Some people call these World War II-era anti-tank barriers the Dragon's Teeth, but their correct name is the Hockerlinnie West Wall. You'll find them in Mettlach, Germany, covered in moss and the occasional piece of anti-war graffiti. The defense line was built by the Germans between 1936 and 1940 and consists of more than 17,000 individual concrete bunkers. Each bunker weighs 9 tons, and the wall runs on for 2,000 feet. German soldiers were once stationed here behind the lines, secretly waiting for an attack from France. The attack never came, as the Nazis managed to invade and occupy France easily, with very little coming back the other way in terms of counterattacks. The degree to which nature has since reclaimed the area is extensive, but beneath the foliage, the majority of the bunkers are still in good condition. It's even become a popular destination for ramblers and hikers who combine their exercise with the opportunity to learn a little about the history of the region. The anti-tank barriers have fared less well over the years, but you can still see the scrappy remains of them. People once thought that Fort Eben-Emael in Basanga, Belgium, was impenetrable. These days, nature has very little problem breaking into it, and nor would anybody or anything else. There's been a fort at the site since before the start of the First World War, but it was significantly expanded during World War II because of its strategically important location on the border between Belgium and the Netherlands. By the time the expansion was complete, the site covered 750,000 square yards and was among the biggest military forts in Europe. There are so many miles of tunnels below the ground that you could almost call it an underground city. Its impenetrable reputation was destroyed along with much of the base itself in 1940 when German paratroopers dropped in from the sky and wrecked the structure with flamethrowers and explosives. The soldiers beneath the tunnels were trapped and became sitting ducks when the Nazi ground force marched in. The scale of the German victory was celebrated in German propaganda, and Belgium's military didn't fully recover from the blow until the end of the war. Fort Eben-Emael has been abandoned ever since then. You'll also find remnants of the German war effort on the beaches of Ringkøbing in Denmark in the shape of the Hvide Sande Nazi bunkers. Denmark tried to stay out of the Second World War and, like Switzerland, declared itself to be neutral. But the Nazis invaded it anyway not long after the war began. They wanted to use Denmark as a base from which to attack Norway. To support that ambition, they created 50 bunkers in and around Huvik. Not all of them have survived, but of those that have, the Hvide Sande bunkers are the best preserved. They've stood empty since the war, and the young residents of the area don't even know their history. It's not uncommon to see children running between the bunkers and playing hide-and-seek. On warm nights, they're often used by stargazers and astronomers, who use the structures to filter out the light from the surrounding area and get a better look at the heavens. It's all a very far cry from the unpleasant purposes that the bunkers were originally created for. The beaches of Noordwijk in the Netherlands were once a pleasant golf course. When World War II began and the Nazis seized control of the area, that changed dramatically. They started by building living quarters and training facilities and ended up creating Battery Noordwijk, which includes Bunker S414. The bunker is one of the largest of its kind, featuring walls 10 feet thick. The total amount of concrete used in its construction is equivalent to the full capacity of 300 modern cement trucks. This facility was an important part of the Atlantic Wall, which was Hitler's network of coastal fortifications and defenses. The sand and grass of the old golf course was ripped up and used as both a coating and a disguise for the bunkers. Disguising bunker S414 can't have been easy. It was the facility's command bunker and stands 3 stories tall, offering a stunning panoramic view of the ocean. Most of the buildings erected here by the Nazis have since been covered over with sand, but S414 was spared that fate and instead now functions as a war museum. Turning an old war bunker into a museum after a war is over isn't particularly unusual. The transformation of the Blavend Beach bunker mules in Blavend, Denmark is far stranger. This part of the Jutland Peninsula was once a horrific sight, covered by more than 7,000 sprawling concrete bunkers. They stayed that way long after the war ended, but that changed with a special event in the 1990s to mark 50 years since the cessation of hostilities. 24 international artists were invited to the beach to turn the old bunkers into works of art. The most famous of all the art installations here are the steel mule heads and tails attached to 4 of the bunkers by British sculptor Bill Woodrow. There's more to the sculptures than meets the eye. Woodrow didn't choose mules just because he thought they'd look good. He chose them because mules are infertile. Metaphorically, Woodrow's sculptures symbolize that the horrors of the Second World War should never be reproduced. That's why the sculptures have remained standing for longer than many of the other works that were created at the time. Almost every country that was involved in the Second World War was forced to create concrete bunkers. Canada was no different. The Canadians created Fort Peninsula in Gaspé, Quebec, and tasked the facility and the soldiers stationed there with protecting the Allied shipping convoys that passed through the area. It's a strange sight in what's otherwise a fairly quiet Canadian fishing town. The complex became active on May 1, 1942, and it wasn't a moment too soon. The first German U-boats were spotted in the nearby Gulf of St. Lawrence just 1 week later. Fort Peninsula played a crucial role in the sinking of 23 German ships between 1942 and 1944. Including 5 in a single day during the Battle of the St. Lawrence on September 15, 1942. The German threat had receded by mid-1944 as the tide of the war turned in favor of the Allies, and many of the fort's weapons were removed in October of that year. Fort Peninsula has been mostly abandoned since then, but 2 QF 4.7-inch B Mark IV guns have been reinstalled in recent years to bring the bunkers to life for those who wish to visit the museum that now exists at the site. The Staatswald bunkers in Schwäbisch Gmünd, Germany aren't technically abandoned. In fact, they have thousands of permanent occupants. It's just that the occupants are endangered species of bats, rather than the soldiers they were originally built for. Rather than being connected to the Second World War, these are Cold War bunkers built in Germany by American forces during the 1950s. They were primarily used as ammunition depots, although there were always soldiers here to protect the supplies. After the work was finished, the bunkers were topped with trees and bushes, so they couldn't be seen by planes flying overhead. When the Americans eventually left Schwäbisch Gmünd and handed the land back to the German military decided it had no use for the Staatswald bunkers and abandoned them. During the American years, there were persistent rumors in Germany that nuclear weapons were stored at the site, but no sign of any such weapons of mass destruction was identified, and the rumors were probably unfounded. This is still a protected site even today, but only because of the bat refuge. RAF Stenningat in Lincolnshire, England, was once the hub of a vital communications network that helped to protect Britain and its allies from the threat posed by the Germans, and later, the Soviet Union. If the country's enemies had ever attempted to launch an airstrike on the United Kingdom, RAF Stenningat would have been expected to see the attack coming. Today, there's almost nothing left of it, save for a few rusty old dishes laying on the ground. And even they are in the process of being dismantled. The radar station opened in 1938 and remained active in its first form until 1955. It was at the heart of the chain home network and originally contained 8 aerial towers and support buildings. It played a crucial role in intercepting several German air raids during the war, and was subsequently adapted to become an early warning station operated by NATO under the codename Ace High. In that guise, it remained in use until the mid-1980s. Demolition work began in the 1990s, but until very recently, the radar dishes were permitted to remain at the site. The land still belongs to the UK's Ministry of Defence, but it seems they no longer have any use for it. RAF Stenengat was important during the Cold War, but the Cold War is over, and so is the usefulness of many of the structures that were created during it. Another example of that is Devinska Kobila missile base in Bratislava, Slovakia, which is hidden high in the hills and long forgotten. The base isn't as old as it probably looks. Construction work began in 1979 and ended in 1983. The project to create Devinska Koblia missile base was agreed as part of the Warsaw Pact, but in comparative terms it didn't remain active for very long. The military moved out in 1996, and since then nature has done a good job of breaking down the structures and reclaiming the land. Back when the site was active, it hosted 16 anti-aircraft missiles inside its dark, narrow bunkers. These days, there's a newer military lookout tower not far from here, with a clear view of the missile base, but it doesn't seem that anybody is interested in protecting it. Hikers pass through here most days, as do graffiti artists. In fact, some of the larger graffiti art could be considered a collaborative project and is updated regularly. The threat of war with Nazi Germany existed in Europe long before the Second World War began in 1939. Many European nations built fortifications in preparation for such an event. Fort Stachelberg in Trutnov, Czechia, was one of those fortifications. In the event that Germany decided to invade the country, which was known as Czechoslovakia back then, Fort Stachelberg was to be the first line of defense. We have no idea whether the fort would have repelled such an attack because it never got a chance to prove it. The Sudetenland between Czechoslovakia and Germany was given to Hitler under the policy of appeasement in 1938, so the Nazis gained control of the area without a shot being fired, and Fort Stachelberg was never fully completed. The site is now an open-air museum, although in truth the museum doesn't have much to exhibit because nothing of note ever happened here during the war. Most of the structures are clustered into one location, but there are small associated bunkers all over the surrounding hillside, which can be visited by hikers without having to pay a fee to enter the rest of the site. When we hear the word bunker, we immediately get an image in our minds. Most bunkers look broadly similar, but that isn't true of every bunker. The Winkel Towers of Zossen in Germany might just be the strangest looking bunkers in the world. These tall, cone-shaped structures look more like space rockets or missiles than military hideouts, although locals are more likely to refer to them as the concrete cigars. There were once around 200 structures like this in Germany, all of which were built during the Second World War and designed to function as air raid shelters. Those in Zossen were especially well equipped because they were so close to the Nazi Supreme Command Center in Berlin. The idea behind their design, which came from an architect called Leo Winkel, is that their narrow shape would make it hard to target the bunkers from the air, and that even if a bomb did hit them, they would slide down the side of the structures rather than detonate on impact. The theory mostly turned out to be true, as only one Winkel Tower is recorded as having been destroyed by an Allied bomb blast during the war. The flak towers of Vienna, Austria, are part of the city's cultural heritage, even though it's been years since they served any purpose. They look more like castles than 20th century military fortresses. The colossal structures were at the heart of the city's defenses during the war years, each capable of firing off 8,000 rounds per minute in the event of an attack. There aren't any soldiers inside them anymore, and nor are there any guns, but you'll find thousands of pigeons living there happily. Hitler ordered the creation of 11 flak towers in total, 3 in Berlin, 2 in Hamburg, and 6 in Vienna. They had an operational range of almost 9 miles with a 360-degree field of fire. The space inside them could also double as an air raid shelter, with enough space to temporarily accommodate 10,000 people. The Allies eventually developed bombs capable of destroying the 10-foot thick walls of structures like the flak towers, but even then, Allied pilots would avoid the tower known as Flakturm 7 because of its fearsome reputation. While most of the towers have no present-day use for anyone other than the pigeons, Flak Tower 2L is now an aquarium called Haus des Meeres. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!